throughout this series of 3 programs, the facilitator will ask you to look within yourself for understanding. If you do that, really do that, you might get some insights that will be invaluable in your life. If you simply believe what the facilitator says, or reject what the facilitator says, it will do no good whatsoever. To help us in that process, we will begin each session with a very short meditation, just to feel our unity together. And during the programs, we will pause frequently for reflection. Of necessity, I give a little bit of theosophical theory, but even then, look at your own experience. Insight comes that way. It doesn't come from lectures. It doesn't come from books. Those things may stimulate the insight. The speaker may point in a direction that you may look at and discover something. But to simply remember what the speaker says and repeat it is next to useless. So the objectives that we have for this series is to discover how meditation leads to spiritual insight, spiritual intuition, which is really insight, and I'll address that in a moment. To discover what blocks it. Why don't we get insight? Why are we up against a hard place so frequently without a clue? Why don't we get a flash of understanding more often? Before I go further, I'm talking to myself as well as you. I never talk down to anybody. All this comes out of my own experience and the experience of thousands. So what blocks this? Desire and attachment to the objects of desire. An extraordinarily broad subject and a snare so great it is hard to fathom. Beliefs, even theosophical beliefs. Strong opinions, bullheadedness. Reactive habit. Not the kind that we're used to thinking of, such as smoking, drinking. Those are habits, not very healthy ones. But the psychological habits, the insidious ones that lie in the subconscious, the reactions that we do from moment to moment without even being aware of it, they block insight. And finally, to discover how we might destroy those blocks and find a more joyful life. Now, I've given you a bunch of handouts. I will just say something about each of them. They're not going to be used during the program, but I would like you to have them. There's one on suggested meditations. Many of you are meditators for years. This will all be unnecessary for you, but nonetheless you might want to look at it. There are suggested ways of meditating, not need to read them now, but you can take them along with you. And that one is, I believe, duplexed. You'll find one of them mentioned on the back, and we may do one of those during these programs. Then there's one called meditation. I think there's on the back of that one maybe also, if not, it'll be elsewhere, seed thought meditations. But let's deal with one that just says meditation. There are a number of quotes there that are really quite beautiful about meditation. the last one on that page is not specifically about meditation, but I thought it so useful that I wanted to include it. Then there is seed thought meditations, most of them from the Voice of the Silence. Seed thought meditations are phrases that tickle the back of your mind. You read something and you say, there's something in that, but I don't quite know what. So you ponder it. You don't dissect it piece by piece because you'll have nothing left. You let it sit in the back of your mind and dig for meaning with an open mind, free of preconceived ideas. Weeks later, insight may flash on your mind. I remember one like that I may have here, I'm not sure. Many years ago when I first read The Voice of the Silence, I came upon the line, "Restrain by thy divine, thy lower self. Restrain by the eternal, the divine." The first phrase meant something to me even then. The second was a mystery that now has profound meaning for me. I didn't dissect it. I let it sit there. And in meditation, I pondered it. And now it has meaning beyond words. So that's the idea. And there are many seed thought meditations, not just the ones that I've listed here. And then there's the well-known 3 items. There is a road, golden stairs, and oh, hidden life. And you can look at those. Most of you know those. So they're the handouts which you can take a look at later on. Now, spiritual intuition, Blavatsky calls what we would say insight, she calls spiritual intuition. It's not intuition in the usual sense of the word, because when we say intuition, mostly we mean a psychic hunch. You get a feeling that a friend isn't well. You have no logical reason for that. And you call on the phone, and sure enough, they're not well. Well, we've picked up something at the psychological level, and that's very valid, and most of you have had at least some of that in your life. But by spiritual intuition, Blavatsky means that flash of understanding that probably every human being gets once in a while, some on rare occasions, some on many occasions, where we don't understand something, and then suddenly we do. And there's that aha experience. Isn't that something that you've all experienced in some way or another? Not about spiritual matters, so-called. Maybe about a computer problem. Maybe about a personal relations problem. Whatever it is, one moment we do not know. The next moment we do. And there's no measurable time in between the two. That is spiritual intuition. That comes from a deep state of consciousness, at least theoretically, within every human being. Now, we're said to be on a journey, we human beings, the pilgrimage. What is that pilgrimage? Don't you think most people, I should say every person, wants to be happy? Even the masochist is trying to seek happiness through pain. We all seek that happiness in different ways, don't we? Most of them end in dead ends. It doesn't make us happy, whatever it is. except for a short period of time. I had a brother who was an atheist and hedonist in many ways, and yet did a great deal of good. He was a principal in a ghetto school district of a grade school. And he did so much good that when I officiated at his funeral some years ago, they sent busloads of teachers and principals to his funeral. And teacher after teacher told me how wonderful he had been. Yet he was an atheist and hedonist in many ways. And he had a wicked sense of humor. But these things didn't matter. He was trying to seek happiness. And he wanted to know who he was. So he went to the biological tree, which never meant anything to me. We all came from Susan and Saul Schwartz over there in the Middle East, right? Called Adam and Eve. I thought, but I didn't say it to him, you have asked a spiritual question. Who am I? And he sought the answer in the physical line. So we all seek happiness in different ways, and we don't find it except for a short period of time. My brother thought he would be wonderfully happy if he just had a Jaguar. And when he said it, I thought 3 months at the most. Then he needs something else. We know someone who was bereft of any spiritual guidance in life, born in a communist country, without any interest in religion or anything of the kind. Shopping is an obsession with that person. Wherever he goes, shop, 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 fending off the inevitable death. So we seek happiness. And that seeking, I suggest to you, is a search for self, for who we really are. Now, it's said in the Theosophical theory that we human beings go through 7 major stages of development, called in the primary literature root races. Terrible name because it has nothing to do with race. 7 major stages of human development. We're not going to go through all those. That's not our purpose this morning. But the 5th stage, in which all humanity is said to now be going through in an evolutionary way, is the development of mind. There's a special emphasis on the mental development. The next stage, coming thousands upon thousands of years from now, in the mass, some of it happening now, and individual by individual, is the development of insight or spiritual intuition. So that just as the majority of the human race, with certain exceptions, have 5 senses, we all can see, hear, etc. It is said that thousands upon thousands of years from now, insight will be as natural to the human being as sight now is to the human being. So that we would be able to turn our attention to whatever it is we want to understand and get a flash of understanding about the principles, not every detail maybe, but the essential nature of whatever it is we want to understand. The adepts, sometimes called masters, or the brothers, are said to have that fully developed. We get it a little bit here and there. And as Einstein says, sometimes, the intuition comes, we don't know how or why. They know how or why. And eventually it is said we will. So this is what we're aiming for. The development of real insight, not hunches, psychic hunches, not God's lips to my ears. Because every little idea that comes in our head is not necessarily from the eternal. So if we want to have more and more insight in our life, more and more understanding, it seems to me that the prerequisite for that is to learn how to quiet our mind. I think many people think, oh, if I could only get my emotions under control, all would be well. Piece of cake compared to getting your mind under control. Try thinking of one thing for just 2 minutes. I doubt you can do it. I know I find it extraordinarily difficult. Because your mind pulls you right off. Well, why did he say that? So, controlling the mind, I don't like the word control. Directing the mind is essential. But learning how to quiet it. Now, there is one little meditative exercise, I've described it in the handout, you don't need to look at it now, that almost everyone can do and get something right away. When I do meditation workshops, wherever I do them, I start with this because 98% of everybody present can do it easily, and within 2 minutes or 3 minutes, they realize they've done something within themselves. And that is to find something in nature that has meaning to you. A great tree, a mountain, the ocean, a powerful waterfall, or even a little one. Haven't we all been in nature at some point and felt peaceful? We may be very anxious about something, and then we come upon Niagara Falls, or the Grand Canyon, or just a simple tree. And for a moment, there's no me. There's only unity with that nature. So we're going to take just a minute, we won't do it long, to do that. Let's see if everyone can just be quiet within themselves and see something in nature that means something to you. It could even be a tree on this property. And see if we can feel unity with that tree or mountain. Thank you. If we looked within ourselves and centered our point of observation on the inner self, we would soon escape from the coils of the great serpent of illusion. From the cradle to the grave, our lives would then become supportable and worth living, even in its worst stages. What could be more valuable than that? H.P. Blavatsky wrote that. It's in Collected Works. You see the reference on the screen. But what is self? Many answers to that one. Most of them likely false. Are we a little like the man who was waiting to be rebooked on a flight from New York to Chicago? All flights had been canceled out of JFK because of electrical storms in between the two cities. Some of you know the story. It's in the Secret Gateway. Well, businessman, three-piece suit, looking very all-American businessman, went to the gate, said to the agent at the gate, who was trying desperately to rebook hundreds of people, and said, "I absolutely have to be on this next flight." She said, "Sir, you're going to have to wait in line like everyone else." And he became enraged and said, "Do you have any idea who I am?" She took the mic and said, "Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, we have a man here at gate 36 who appears to have lost his identity." If anyone can help him find it, please report to gate 36. Well, let's hope we're not so arrogant as that man, but maybe we're a little bit like him. Maybe we've lost our identity. Many people, including my brother that I mentioned, think they're the body. That's it. You're born, you live, you die. Nothing more. Are we? Well, I suppose it's possible. But I rather suspect not, because something in me, something in you remains the same, doesn't it? From childhood to old age, there's still some sense of self, something that's the same. That body changes almost absolutely, totally. Some say a few cells in the brain remain. Every 7 years, why aren't we different? As a human being, as a person, every 7 years. If we're the body. Be kind of a good idea if some people were different every 7 years, wouldn't it? So I don't see how that's possible. Somebody once told me when I mentioned that I believed in reincarnation, "Oh, you people who believe that are afraid of death." Well, I take seriously anything that is said to me that's a challenge like that. I don't just brush it off. I might look like I do. I might say something caustic, but I do think about it. Usually I devastate them with humor. I thought about it. I'm not at all afraid of death. I'm afraid of being reborn. One of my mentors, Fritz Kuntz, used to call death happy pleasure number 99. So maybe we're our feelings. We identify with our feelings a lot, don't we? Oh, he hurt me, she hurt me. Really? All of you? Or just an aspect of you? They change constantly, don't they? Sometimes dramatically in a few seconds. Sometimes over years. We sometimes say people mellow out. I've heard that said of myself. But I like to retain a little bit of my nastiness, I guess. What about the mind? Are we that? In one sense, maybe, but not the thinking, feeling mind that changes constantly. What is it that stays the same? You're watching your own experience, aren't you? The observer. Pure awareness itself without objects. We've all awakened at some point, and for a nanosecond there's just am. Not who, what, where, just am. Neither happy nor sad. Just what HPB would have called beingness. Not being, which is process. A noun, beingness. It is said that is the only eternal aspect of us. Everything else, even the other components of the inner self, change. But that remains. That's called in each individual Atma, A-T-M-A. The universal is called Atman. It's a point in consciousness. We are points in consciousness, it is said. How can we see if there may be truth to that? When you're on the phone, and this has happened to everyone, and someone is in the room, you're talking to whoever it is on the phone, and someone in the room starts talking to you, what do? You try to listen to both, don't you? Can you do it? Not really. You can listen here and listen there, and finally you give up and say, excuse me, what is it you're saying? You say to the person in the room. One-pointed in consciousness, can't do two things at the same, can't consciously do two things at the same time, can do many things at the same time when they are relegated to the subconscious, can do this, but when I learned it, I had to think of this first, then this. Even now I can get confused, you see. And then I can do both without paying any attention to my hands. I'm paying attention to what I'm saying, you see. One-pointed in consciousness. Atma. Demonstrable in every person. Now that consciousness can function, it is said, in 7 states. We might say Atma can function in 7 states of consciousness, 7 states of matter. We're familiar only with physical matter in 3 states, solid, liquids, gases. But it is said that our emotions are also composed of substance so rarefied that our physical instruments cannot pick it up. Our mind also, our spiritual nature also, in one of the Mahatma letters they talk about, they believe in matter, and matter alone, but they don't mean they're materialists in the sense that we think of materialists. We can focus our attention on our right thumb, especially if it gets bumped. Isn't that different from focusing in our emotions? Isn't that different than being centered in our mind, being so busy with what we're doing that we're not even aware we're hungry until we take a breath and then say, wow, I'm famished? One-pointedness in consciousness, focused on what we're doing with our mind. Everything else like peripheral vision. So one-pointed in consciousness. Now, the next, and then we can move on, is called buddhi, B-U-D-D-H-I. That is a level within us, a state of consciousness within us, which is truth itself. That is the state from which we derive the intuition, the insight. That is the state that gives us the ability to say, aha, I got it. Because from that state of consciousness, the truth can, but is not necessarily, flashed on the mind. And we understand. Here's what HPB writes about Atma Buddhi. That which in thee shall live forever, that which in thee knows, for it is knowledge, is not a fleeing life. It is the man that was, that is, and will be, for whom the hour shall never strike. That which in thee shall live forever is what knows, because it is knowledge. Now there's a seed thought meditation for you. Now some people in the New Age movement, which has some value, I don't want to put it all down, though most of it is not for me personally, say, oh, well, we all know everything already anyway. Well, they don't look like they do to me. Only in the sense that it lies there in potential do we know everything already anyway. It has to flash on the human mind first, and that mind has to be clear, has to be calm like a mountain lake. When the mind is ruffled with thought, with the thinking, feeling nature, it does not reflect accurately. Isn't that obvious? Think about it. When you're very anxious, when you're angry, do you think clearly? Anybody? I don't think, well, maybe you do. I don't know. I can't say you don't. But I'd find it hard to believe that you can. Only later, when you're quiet, do you say, oh, that's what I should have done. That's what I should have said. Because the mind is going like that, distorting the images like a mirror in the circus. Not accurate. Oh, most of the great sages, if not all, have talked about the need for this quietness. There's a line in Scripture, Western Scripture, Judeo-Christian, and maybe it's just in the New Testament, I can't remember. Be still and know that I am God. You meet these evangelists on the street, screaming and yelling about various passages in Scripture. I have been known to pass them in the city and say, be still and know that I am God. Doesn't do much good, of course, but it gives me a little joy for the minute, a little pleasure. Not so hard to sit still physically. Isn't it hard to be still within? None of this is easy, folks. I'm no Pollyanna, nor a doomsday prophet. I try to tell it like it is, but worth every ounce of effort you put into it. If you are a new meditator or one who just wants to start, or even if you're one who meditates rather regularly, I strongly suggest that you do it every day. Just for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. Not more if you're new to this process. Preferably in the morning, but not necessarily. You can do it at 5 in the afternoon. You can do it anytime. But it's a little easier early in the morning because your day hasn't begun, your mind isn't accumulating everything of the day, is it, in the very early morning. And you take up to 5 minutes just to think of that tree or mountain with the intent that it will affect you during the day. I can almost guarantee in a few months you'll feel the effect of that. Because when you start to get anxious later in the day, that image in nature will pop back in your mind. How do we drop thoughts in our mind? By trying to kill them? Oh no, you'll make them stronger if you do that. Think of a time you have a melody in your head, one of those annoying commercials. Doesn't it get louder and more annoying? Even something nice like English country dance music that Mary and I love, gorgeous melodies. Sometimes those melodies are in my head and I find it difficult to get rid of them. I'll start to meditate and that melody will come into my mind. How does it die? Think about it in your experience. Isn't it that your attention is drawn elsewhere? The phone rings. You start talking with a friend. That melody, that annoying thought, whatever it is, has life only while we give it conscious attention. Do you see that in your experience? Once my conscious attention, Atma, is pulled from that annoying thought or melody or whatever it is, over here, this has its life blood taken out of it, and it begins to die all by itself. This is all related to clearing the mind so that we can see what is. So if we do that every day, I think it can be very valuable. Then, of course, it is important to deepen the meditation. See then, after a while, it'll be up to you. Some people will do it in a few days, some in a few weeks, some in a few months, maybe some in years. Time doesn't matter. Not really. Not at all. See if you can find within your own self a state of complete stillness. Not the stillness of the graveyard. A living stillness. A powerful peace. And then see if you can identify with it, like you did with the tree, one with the tree. Now, I must use words, but words are useless in the long run. We only use them to point toward what needs to be done. Say to yourself, I am that peace. There are many methods to meditation, but from my point of view, there are two principal aspects of meditation. First, learning to quiet the mind. Second, being that inner stillness, reality itself. Be that which was, that which is, that which ever shall be, that which never changes, that which is the unspeakable eternal. If you do that, with the single goal of union with the eternal, there will come a point where there's a shift in the seat of consciousness. And for a timeless flash, there will be no me. There will be no time. There will only be eternity. You'll never forget it. No matter how much it dims, no matter how many more challenges come in your life, you'll know that at root, you are one with the eternal. In the piece called There Is a Road, this was found in the papers of H.P. Blavatsky after she died. It's the piece from which I got the title of my book. I gave a talk on it years ago. Why is the road steep and thorny? Why does it open inwardly only? All those questions. And I made an attempt to give some possible answers to it. But it's a wonderful little short piece. about this pilgrimage that we're all on. There is a road steep and thorny, beset with perils of every kind, but yet a road, and it leads to the very heart of the universe. I can tell you how to find those who will show you the secret gateway that opens inwardly only and closes fast behind the neophyte forevermore. There is no danger that dauntless courage cannot overcome. There is no trial that spotless purity cannot pass through. There is no difficulty that strong intellect cannot surmount. For those who win onward, there is a reward past all telling, the power to bless and save humanity. For those who fail, there are other lives in which success may come. Give it time. We live in a gratify me now culture. This can't be done in a few minutes. It can't be done in one meditation. I don't think it can be done in one lifetime. But the adept wrote that we need to have an iron will and determination, and yet be meek and humble, and to have shut out from our heart every passion that leads to human evil. He added to the recipient of the letter, "Are you all this?" Not yet. I want to say one more thing about the eternal, which is really impossible to say anything about, because whatever we say, it's not correct. The first fundamental proposition speaks of a principle, boundless, eternal, immutable, unspeakable, unthinkable, and then Blavatsky writes 40 or 50 pages about what's unspeakable. Because that's the only way to point our mind, you see. Remembering always, it's not what it looks like. It's only real when experienced. And when experienced, we have to check it out to make sure it's accurate, so that we don't go with our own wishful thinking. There is a saying, which I may bring up later in one of the sessions, that Milton of Paradise Lost fame said to Cromwell, the Philistine, and his henchmen, "Gentlemen, gentlemen, I beseech you, from the bowels of Christ I beseech you, consider you may be mistaken." Long ago, when I was a teenager, I read a little saying, "Trouble with the world is the ignorant know it all, and the intelligent doubt." And in the voice of the silence, the doctrine of the I, which is mental alone, those who follow that doctrine, in other words, only the intellect without the light of understanding, shout, "This I know." Those who in humbleness have garnered, lo, confess, "Thus have I heard." The more one learns, the more one realizes how little we know. So it is said that the eternal is unspeakable, unthinkable. And the best way to think of it at all, it seems to me, is to think of it as boundless space. That which was before anything else was. Didn't you, as a child, some of you at least, look up at the stars and wonder what was there before there was anything? I used to do that. What would it be like if everything disappeared? What would be left? The adept was asked that question once, and he said, space. We think of ourselves frequently as the body. Let's be honest. Theosophists or not, Atma, Buddhi, Manas or not. We do. It's only natural in our stage of development, I suppose. We can kid ourselves and say we don't until we get a terminal illness. Suddenly we realize what we really think. But we're more space physically than we realize. The nearest, if you blew up an atom, if this could be done, and the nucleus the size of an orange and the electron the size of a lemon, the lemon would be a very, very long way from the orange. What's in between? Space. Our senses say this is solid. Is it? No, 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 no. Not really. Our senses don't lie to us. They just give us a partial understanding. So we'll conclude this morning, perhaps just a wee bit early, making up for the time we lost last night. We had a Scottish dancer, we still have a Scottish dancer, a very dear friend who's from Aberdeenshire, Scotland. I never forgot, when I was a young man before I met Mary, I was at a Scottish ball in upstate New York, and I could dance all the dances then, full out with good technique. Now I can walk half of them. But it's important, the phrasing in Scottish country dancing. You arrive at a certain point with the music right at the right note, you know. You don't arrive 2 bars ahead or 2 bars late to the spot you're designated to be in. And one of the friends of our Scottish dance friend arrived really early at a spot and then just had to stand until the music finished, you know. And our friend Sheila, by name, looked at the friend and said, "What are you going to do with those 2 bars?" And without batting an eye, she said, "I'm saving them for the next dance." So, getting back to this idea of space, we don't think of ourselves as the space of our body. But let's try that in creative imagination. I'll describe what we'll do and then we'll do it. Let's see if we can identify with the space of the body. I'm going to use words, but drop the words, just have the intention, I am the space of my body. And then we're going to see if we can expand in our imagination in all directions. I am the space of this building. And we'll expand more. I am the space of the greater Wheaton area. And then, each time taking a little bit in between to do it. And then, I am the space of the earth. And finally, I am the space of the solar system. Not in the space, be the space. And then we'll reverse it. And see if that doesn't do something for you. Some people find it very helpful. Others say, no, that's not a meditation for me. But I think it gets us a little bit closer to who we really are. As Scott Eliot said in a poem, when that is experienced, it is like coming home and recognizing the place for the first time. Let's be the space of our body. and expanding in all directions. I am the space of the building. Expanding yet again, I am the space of the greater Wheaton area. Expanding more, let's be the space of the earth itself, as it itself is gently rolled through space. Expanding more, let's be the space of the solar system. Without losing identity with space, be the space of the earth. And now the space of the greater Wheaton area. And the space of the building, and then the body. Thank you. Tomorrow we'll open with a short meditation, and then and if you have questions or comments, we'll deal with those when we come in tomorrow. So I hope this will be helpful to you all over the next 2 times when we get right down to the nitty-gritty of those blocks and how we might eliminate them.